Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Drake Podcast of Joy and Gozo TV on this beautiful morning, now in English. What should we do? What does God say about violence? Obviously, you've heard the horrible disaster, the horrible shooting that happened this week in Parkland, Florida, where a 19-year-old crazy man came in and shot 17 of his own peers, high school students and teachers, and killed them. And now he's in jail awaiting his trial. And in the meantime, I can only imagine being a parent myself, and who cannot put themselves in these parents' shoes. I can only imagine the grief, the loss. What does God say about violence? I want to take you to a passage that is very clear about what God believes about violence. This has very little to do about gun laws or about politics. This has everything to do about what God says about these kinds of events, or what his opinion is. I'm just looking it up here really quick so you can see what God says. What is his opinion? Because if we are people of faith, we ultimately need to look to God's word and to at least get some perspective on these kinds of tragedies so that we are not at a loss or simply just giving our opinion on things, which is what often happens. And so I want to take you here, I want to get this all ready for you so that you can see what's going on. What does God say? So I want to take you here to Genesis chapter 6. In verse 13, it says, "And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with" what? Violence through them. "Behold, I will destroy them with the earth." Now, what does this word violence mean? So I'm going to just show you here. The word violence is the Hebrew word kamach. It means obviously violent cruelty, something wrong, injustice, cruelty. It's basically what it says. It's cruelty. It's something that is horribly unjust, wrong, and harmful. And that is what we're seeing here in this particular situation, and any situation like it. Is we're seeing horrible things that are happening, mostly to our young people, to innocent lives. You think of what happened in Vegas. You think of what happened at that church in Charleston, Virginia. You think of what happened way back in Columbine, or what happened in Sandy Hook. We're talking about high schoolers killing high schoolers, children killing children. As a pastor, I see the problems and how they begin when these young people are 1, 2, 3, 5. And what helps is a combination of mental health support, of the church, of parenting, and of the larger community that is speaking for that child or against violence. And then you have the other layers that are the hot buttons of today. Gun control, the left, the right, all of these arguments that really matter, and yet they are incomplete. That's what gets out there. We have to look at where this begins, what's going on. Young people today are troubled. You think of bullying and all these initiatives that are out there, how important they are, because these are the things that happen every day in schools throughout the country, really all over the world. Now, why do we see such violence here in the U.S. as compared to other countries? Is it the access to guns? Of course. Is it the problem of a lack of parental support? Of course. Is it the church no longer exists and people are godless? Of course. Is it something in the water? Maybe, literally, right? I don't know. Is it our diet? Is it the fact that these maybe children are alone? I don't know. You can't blame any one thing. But we have to look at this somehow holistically and do something about it. Call the number on the screen. We'll be right back. So once again, we're back to the last segment here before the top of the hour, talking about what does God say, what the Bible say about violence. And I was reading this passage to you earlier. I want to go to it again about God and destruction and his despise of violence. So let me go back to it again. Genesis 6, it says, "And God said to Noah, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence." Now, I'm not advocating that God needs to destroy all of humanity. That's not my point. God forbid that there's some crazy earthquake. And I don't even believe that that is why these things happen. But my point is that when violence rises, God notices. God despises violence. You think about his very son. He was the ultimate example of peace. He himself is the Prince of Peace. If you are violent in any way, and I speak to this, and I speak to myself on these things. Even just the other day, I thought, that was just too violent. I spoke in a way that didn't build others up. That's why Jesus said, if you think, well, I don't kill, thou shalt not kill. But what did Jesus say? Even if the words out of your mouth hurt somebody else and you say Rama, which basically means you idiot, or you think of someone in a derogatory way, he says you might as well have murdered somebody. And that is how Jesus wants us to live. And that's how he lived. Even on the cross, he says, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. I'm not advocating that we do not be people of justice. In fact, God is a just God. He is a jealous God. He's a consuming fire. He's a disciplinary God as well as a loving God. But at the same time, he's not a God of violence. We have to stand against violence, whatever it takes. It won't be until you, the average person in the pew, the average person that cleans someone's house, the average person who goes to work 7-8 days a week, it's not until we say, stop the violence, that these things will change. We have to speak up. This is a complicated matter, and yet it's so simple. Stop the violence. How do we prevent our neighbors, that kid at church, that kid at school, maybe even your own grandson or granddaughter? How do we prevent these young men? Most of them are males. How do we nurture these young males back to health? We need to have a comprehensive approach that includes putting the church at the center of the city and society once again. Because the church is the place, I am convinced, that has the love and the power and the resources to help a young person in need. So we have to do whatever it takes to make sure that those young people remain in our communities. We have to make sure that those young men and women are in contact with the resources and the mentorship that they need to make sure that they don't do crazy stuff like this young man did. I have young people that need help in my own church. You do too. Every one of us knows someone in school, a friend, a neighbor that needs help, and you feel powerless. I speak from experience. I have neighbors that I feel powerless to help. But what you can do is advocate. Speak up. If something is wrong, you speak up. You call the police. If you see something online, on Instagram, like this young man had all these pictures, you flag them. You call the FBI like this other young man did when he received a comment on his YouTube channel about this same guy saying, I'm going to do something crazy. We have to speak up. We cannot just let things be. Thanks so much. Hasta la pasta.